Hello and welcome. The nationwide lockdown has been extended for 2 more weeks until the 31st of May. So it could be another 14 days of home-cooked meals for everyone, because even though there are now significant relaxations under lockdown 4.0, malls and restaurants are still to get the green signal. Today on We the People, we're talking about an industry which, because of the nature of the business being people-specific, it's been one of the first to be affected and likely to be among the worst and longest affected sectors. I'm talking about the food and beverage industry. The panelists on the show tonight, I can safely say, have affected each and every one of you in your lives. Between them all, you have at some point of time been served by them. You have celebrated life events at their restaurants. You've made memories and conversation over their food. And over the last decade, they have changed the way Indians dine out and expanded our palates. Tonight, they are wondering when and how and if they can serve you again. We're asking tonight, what is the eating out experience in a post-COVID world where it's all about social distancing going to look like? And what will it take for a restaurateur to succeed in a post-COVID world? I'm not going to introduce any of them. They don't need any introductions. Let's go across to A.D. Singh. A.D. Singh, you were among the earliest to down your shutters in your many restaurants much before the official lockdown. You said this was for the safety of your own staff then. When do you think restaurants should be reopened? And what are your safety protocols going to be? Because viewers want to start eating out again, but we worry if we should.
So my main point to the government right now is that with all the amount of information out there, consumers are very savvy about what they're looking for, the levels of risk they're not willing to take. And so is the restaurant industry. We know if we don't do all the right steps, give comfort to the customer, he's not going to come and he's not going to come back. So if the government can be assured that our industry, if allowed to open, will be proceeding very carefully, and between ourselves and the consumers, with all the knowledge we have, it will be fairly safe for everybody to eat out. And what the government needs to realize most above all, you know, Sarah, it's a tough time. There's a lot of pain. Most households are affected. And one of the best ways, easiest ways to give them cheer and a break from the hard times they're going through is to allow them to go out for an evening out with their families, their close friends. Cost the government nothing. We actually pay the government a lot for the right to do that. And we also help the economy through so much money we put in and the number of people we hire. So I would really think it makes a lot of sense for the government to put us on priority and reopen us very quickly.
So, A.D. Singh, let me quickly ask you then why were you among the first to shut down? Out of curiosity then, I'm sure the viewers are wondering that, before the lockdown was put into place.
So what happened at that time, Sarah, we were just trying to understand ourselves, the risks, the different risks. Steps were not in place, knowledge was not all in place. So it was much safer at that time to close down, find out what needs to be done, put all the systems, processes into place, and then open safely again.
Okay, you probably also helped a lot of your staff to then get home before all the borders closed and all the trouble we've seen since then for many. Riaz Amlani, so A.D. Singh saying that the government should open up restaurants now, but really we're looking at a world where everyone wants minimal human touch. But hospitality is about the human touch. So what are we looking at going forward? That, you know, along with your server putting down freshly baked bread, you're going to be served with hand sanitizers, masks, gloves for staff, even for patrons. Not an appetizing thought, but no alternative?
You know, I think with the absence of a definitive cure and a proven virus, you know, we're going to have to learn how to live with the virus, unfortunately, like we're learning to live with a lot of other diseases, right? We currently are in a situation where we have taken a lot of precaution. Like AD said, we shut down immediately when we found out about corona, and that is cases in India were increasing. Obviously, we were concerned about the health of our own workers, because more than anything else, at that point of time, we didn't know how this virus was going to act. It was all very new for us. But as we've, you know, it's been 2 months now, and we've been avidly consuming every bit of information there is around the virus. And we're seeing how countries which are coming out of this virus are behaving, right? And there are many measures that we can take to reduce, contact, to try and actually make sure that the customers are safe and the experience inside the restaurant, both for the customer as well as the people who serve them, is safe.
Okay, so
Yes,
as a former president of the National Restaurants Association, what are you demanding from this government? Because I know you tweeted, I'm looking at your Twitter timeline right now, you've tweeted the president's tweet saying nothing for restaurants, do we matter? The government has just been announcing relief to many industries and many sectors, but nothing for restaurants. Millions of its workers have reached a sad conclusion today that we don't matter. What do you want from the government?
Well, Sarah, it is a little heartbreaking and it is a little demoralizing. We have been, the restaurant industry has borne the major brunt of this lockdown. Like AD said, we shut down earlier, and I think we'll be amongst the last to open up. But we must also remember that, the restaurant industry, and if you take the entire retail ecosystem, which also has been left out, is the single largest employer in the services sector. The restaurants alone employ about over 7 million people, and we contribute about $50 billion to the economy. So it is, and in terms of, it is an employment powerhouse. So if you think about IT or you think about any other industry, we are about 2.5 times the size of that. So we found it very surprising that we are left out in the cold, so to speak, and almost to fend for ourselves. There are many things that the government can do. If they cannot issue handouts like all the other countries are doing, or provide wage support and provide finance directly to the workers, there are many other options that they can, many other things that they can do that can help the industry. For one, is that they can definitely allow input tax credit to restaurants. Currently, restaurants are the only industry which is left out of the input tax credit in the GST, the current GST
Correct.
scenario. They could actually waive off collection of TDS for a while, because let's face it, who's going to be making profits this year? So I don't understand why the government needs to collect TDS and then pay it back a year and a half later. Right now, what we need is liquidity. So anything that the government can do to make sure that there's more liquidity in the hands of the customer will go a very long way in making sure that we all survive together.
And this is an industry already hit by demonetization, rollback of GST input credit. Okay, Ritu Dalmia, then, a lot will depend then on what the government mandates for restaurants once they open, in terms of social distancing, in terms of hygiene measures. In Dubai, for example, I think the government has announced that only 30% of a restaurant can be occupied at any point of time. Would you be comfortable if that would be the reality in India too, or is that what we should expect?
So, Sarah, we have restaurants in Italy and we have restaurants in Delhi.
Yeah.
And the sad part is they are so different. They are so different. In Italy, the government supported our staff wages. They have been paid their wages directly by the government into their accounts since March. So we had to not take any action, whether it was laying off people or doing salary cuts in Italy. And now, yesterday, it has opened up. Finally, Italy is opening up with restaurants, also with social distancing measures of 1.5 meters between two chairs, which can work in Italy for me because my landlords have reduced the rents accordingly. My biggest problem, what I foresee in India right now are, number one, there is no government support, whether it is in wage payments or whether it's suspension of rents or taxes. Number two is with the rents that we pay, whether it's in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, there's no way, if that's what's going to happen and if the landlords don't reduce the rents accordingly or get into revenue sharing model, I hate to admit, but the only way forward for me is to downsize my restaurants, and where we cannot afford rents, just to close our shutters. It's a very difficult moment and a very difficult thing for me to say this on the camera, but there is no other way that I see, because we don't know when we are going to open. And when we open, definitely there'll be social distancing. 30% occupancy, 40% occupancy. I mean, I'm not even going to cover my costs, so why the hell should I bother?
Okay. So why then, if it's not going to cover your costs, why would you even bother to open then under those circumstances? You've raised a very important point about rent. Let's also try and get someone who is possibly renting out, who can talk a little bit about rents to restaurants from malls. Let's try and get them on the show. But Manu, if I can then ask you, what is this going to mean for costs? Because Ritu says opening up at 30% or 6 feet distance of tables is going to affect her cost. She's not going to be able to pay. And it may not even be worth it. But what is this going to mean for costs then for the customer? Because safety rules are now in place. That will raise costs. But on the other hand, consumer discretionary spending is low. There's been salary cuts and job cuts across the board.
Well, there's actually many aspects to it. It's not as cut and dry as just saying that will it be cheaper or will it be more expensive. But yes, I mean, the short answer is that eating out can definitely be a lot more dearer than it was. And this would obviously boil down to the fact that our capacities would be reduced exponentially. We thrive on the fact that we can fill up our spaces, but also be able to turn tables, which means, use the same tables over and over again. That's been taken out of the equation, and that immediately puts a lot of pressure on your revenues. So with revenues being as finite as they are, and cost structures not really changing, it's obviously going to drive a micro-inflationary trend within the establishment itself. Over and above that, you have to understand that the sudden lockdown, when it was announced with the 4-hour notice, was also at a time when one of the largest crops, the Rabi crop is harvested. All that stalled. And we saw, whilst in lockdowns in our own homes, that there was a slow rise in prices in many, many things. This is not something that's going to get abated immediately. This is something that's going to carry on. So it's going to have a bit of a chain reaction. It's going to have this domino effect. And the cost of goods and services are going to go up for us. And like Ritu was mentioning earlier, that, a lot of people will need to share the pain to make these businesses viable. Otherwise, it's just impossible to run those capacities. So, yeah, it will definitely get a little more expensive.
Okay, so you're saying supply chains, inventory, all of that going to be affected. So let me, two points come to mind. One, about what does this mean for menus and ingredients? Are we going to see more going local? And I want to ask you, what do you, Manu Chandra, see the future as being? Because, the bar culture of Bangalore, where you are, iconic places like Monkey Bar that were radical when they opened up in Delhi and introduced the idea of sharing a table with strangers. I think that's where I first, sat down at a table with a complete stranger next to me. Restaurants like Social that have invested in co-working spaces, right? So this concept of sharing a table, sharing a plate of fries, is that all a thing of the past?
Well, for the immediate future, it is a thing of the past. Because like 88 mentioned earlier, there is a trust deficit in the mind of the consumer. Yes, they are all dying to get out of their homes. They want to socialize. We are social animals at the end of the day. We can't be constrained in our own homes. But the danger is a clear and present one. So, the need to go out exists, but it's obviously being taken away from them. And, that's a tough one, really.
Okay.
As far as what menus would look like, your second part of the question, is embracing local the way to go? Absolutely. I think that's actually a very good way of looking at things. I think embracing biodiversity, being a lot more responsible with the way you use ingredients, how you engineer your menus, these unlimited buffets and menus that just go on and on and on will take a back seat. We'll see more focus. We'll see talent being leveraged more effectively, and I do think that's going to create a bit of a positive paradigm in the restaurant headspace.
So you're saying more efficiency in staffing when you say talent being used more effectively.
Absolutely.
So less people phoning, sometimes that can also get overwhelming in Indian restaurants. There's so many people phoning over you, asking you, which is sometimes lovely. Now that I'm going to restaurants more with a kid, it's really wonderful to see how the staff help out and things. But that would also mean job losses when we talk about efficiency.
So yes, absolutely. That's a huge downside.
So Ritu, then if costs are going to go up, and as Manu says, people do want to be able to go out. We are social beings, right? Now, but after a decade where we've seen a zoom in the number of Indians eating out, what the pandemic has done is fundamentally change behavior and our concept of going out, with wondering more about hygiene than ambience, safety. We not just to consumers need to feel safe, but your staff also, because work from home is not an option for kitchen staff, is it? Or a chef like you. So can I still expect that, when I come to a diva, Ritu Dalmia will be there. She'll walk over to your table. She'll say, how are you doing? Is that, I don't want Ritu Dalmia to come over to my table anymore.
So if that doesn't happen, then I should be out of the business. Because for me, really, restaurant is just not about being technical or robotical, however much you may talk about hygiene, etc. But there has to be social interaction. There has to be, as I said, that's basic human nature. And yes, we have COVID-19 right now. Maybe there'll be a COVID-20 next year. Who knows? But does that mean that do we change the very basic integral part of us, which is being with people or having that? Because restaurants is about human touch.
Sure, but the government, Ritu, I'm sure has to walk this fine line, because you took the example of Italy, which has had one of the highest cases, the largest number of deaths. But you touched upon a very crucial question, which was about what the future will look like will depend on what the rents are going to look like going forward. So let me just bring in Arjun Sharma here. He is the chairman of Select City Walk, one of the oldest malls in the capital. Arjun Sharma, please come in over here. Restaurants badly hit over the last 2 days. Restaurants in malls hit even more. But all the restaurateurs here are saying the only way for them to survive, to come out of this, is if there's a new model when it comes to rents or equal revenue sharing, I'm guessing, and what rents are going to mean for restaurants, both for the last 2 months and possibly for the next 6 months. Your response?
Empathize with all my restaurant friends, as well as the entire retail industry, the shopping center industry, travel and tourism. I think if you look at the whole gambit of the services industry that have been left out of this 20 lakh crore, it's actually quite shocking. All of us have kind of been very vocal about the fact that this one industry employs a lot of people, and a lot of capital is at stake. Now, when it comes to the specific issue of the restaurants, we're in a very hard spot when it comes to finding a balance between the fact that most of our shopping centers, we're about 1,650 of them roughly across the country. Most of our rentals are securitized at the banks. So today it's the banks that are telling us that why are you not raising the rent checks? Why are you not raising the bills and invoices for the rents? So it's actually a very difficult situation, because the shopping centers have also not got any relief from the government at all. So we're in a really hard spot. Yet we empathize with it, yet we are talking to all our restaurant partners as well as all other retail partners. And hopefully we'll find a reasonable balance between what they should pay and what they would like to pay. So I guess this is going to be something that will be individual discussions. But yeah, it's a tough spot for the whole economy. And I think if you really look at, and I may add one more minute to this opening comment, if you really look at what's been in the lockdown 4 opening, it's actually quite shocking that the shopping centers have not been allowed to open across the country, be it green, be it any zone. They just said no to us. You're allowed to open retail on the high street, but you're not allowed to open any form of retail in any shopping center. Whereas I think shopping centers are better equipped today when it comes to creating SOPs rather than the high streets. Now, if you look at the Shopping Center Association of India, we have a 48-page SOP in place that we have submitted to the Ministry of Home Affairs. We have submitted that to Niti Aayog, and we've said that, look, these are probably the best places to first open. So we really don't understand why the government is not opening these, because we're in a better place than really any other high street that you can think of. So I'm hoping that better sense will prevail come 31st of May. But yes, we're indeed disappointed. Incidentally, and I have to say this, that the state of Delhi actually recommended that shopping centers to open effective tomorrow. But obviously they can't go against the guidelines of the Ministry of Home Affairs. So I guess we're all stuck.
Well, now according to Lockdown 4.0, the government has actually given more leeway, more loosen the rope for the states. So the states will finally get to decide. But Riyaz Amlani, then please come in here because the NRAI is requesting a stay on rents to help fill the gap created in the absence of new cash. You have Mr. Sharma here saying it's the banks who are pressurizing them. So where does the buck stop?
You have to look at the whole value chain of retail, I think. And wherever the support can come in, I think that's where, we'll adjust the model. So if the government is giving our landlords, holidays on property taxes, which is one of the biggest expenses, whether they're giving them moratoriums and interest deferment or even lowered interest to our landlords, who can then pass on the benefit to the entire to the retail ecosystem, right? Similarly, if the government gives wage support to restaurateurs, then we can pass on some of that benefit to the landlord. So I think somewhere down the line, if the government does not intervene in anywhere in the value chain, it's going to be a bloodbath for sure.
Okay.
There are going to be people who are not going to be open. So anywhere in the value chain, wherever the support comes, I think landlords and retailers have a symbiotic relationship. Restaurants have a symbiotic relationship, and they will ultimately work out a new model. But if relief and if assistance does not come in, or some kind of support does not come in anywhere in the value chain, then it's going to be a disaster.
Okay. Last word, AD Singh, 30 seconds. I want to ask you, surely there must be some positive that has come out of this as a consumer. I'm thinking, there's why didn't we do things like checking the temperature of everybody working in restaurants before? Just the emphasis on hygiene, on delivery. Is that a positive? Could you think of any positives that have come out of this for the restaurant industry? A note that we can end on?
I think for the restaurant industry, the one positive for me is that we've become even closer. Adversity brings everybody together, and it's a very, very difficult time for us. So we're all speaking with one voice now. It was long needed, and I think now the government needs to support that by giving us our own ministry and us both working side by side.
Well, thank you all for coming on the show tonight. We're glad to be able to give you a platform. We do think this is an important aspect that needed to be touched upon. Everybody wants to go back to restaurants, and I'm sure our viewers will be pleased to hear about everything you're trying to do to make it a safer experience for everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.